Good afternoon. My name is Brianna Bobo, and I am the chair for the City of St. Louis Charter Commission. I am pleased to call to order the special meeting of the Charter Commission, organized for and behalf of the people of the City of St. Louis. The time is now 4:35 p.m. here in St. Louis, and we welcome members of the public who have joined us virtually. I will now yield the floor to our secretary, Scott Intagliata, for him to conduct the roll call at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Bobo, when I call your name, please say present or here. Chair Bobo?
Here.
The Vice Chair Sheridan?
I have a note saying that if he is able to make it, he will be running a little late.
Very good. Parliamentarian Garth?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Crossland?
Here.
Commissioner Grant?
Present.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles? Commissioner Riley? And Secretary Intagliata is present. So that shows us to have 6 attendees, which I believe constitutes quorum.
Thank you.
And then my pleasure.
Yes.
Five, Scott.
I believe we have 5.
Yeah, no, but we have 6. So
Oh.
great. Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Okay, got it.
Very good.
Secretary Intagliata, if you wouldn't mind also calling the roll of our ex officio non-voting members at this time.
Good, please, thank you. The Honorable Joseph Ulmer, Alderman to Ward 5. Chief of Staff Jared Boyd is designee of Mayor Tashara Jones and filling in for Director Casey Milberg.
Present.
Thank you. Director Christine Ingracia is as designee of President Megan Green.
Present.
The Director Sonia Gray.
I believe you are on
City
mute,
Councilor.
Sonia.
Oh.
Sonia Gray is here. I believe she was on mute. She said here.
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. City Councilor Sheena Hamilton.
Present.
Special Assistant Nadrick Tankins as designee for Comptroller Darlene Green and replacing Tara Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. J. Cummel, Labor Representative. Okay. There you are, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So moving on to item 3 in our agenda. During our April 15th meeting, we voted to advance a proposed charter amendment related to the Board of Aldermen, which would potentially change its name to City Council based on some of our recommendations, and provide that City Council with the ability to increase and decrease the budget, provide that council failed to adopt a budget by July 1st, the prior year's budget would go into effect, provide the City Council with a legal department, make some portion of the City Council elected at large, and make it so that the City Council president was elected by their members. During that same meeting, if you recall, on April 15th, we also voted to advance a proposal related to the Department of Transportation. And then fast forwarding a little bit to May 20th, our May 20th meeting, we voted to advance 12 bundles of proposed charter amendments, bringing our grand total to 14 for public comment at our next public hearing. So we have not done yet the work of prioritizing the proposed recommendations, but we have voted through this next phase. So our next agenda item at this point, just wanted to give a little context about where we are. Our next agenda item is a presentation from Director Sonia Jenkins Gray, pardon me, regarding the civil service article. At this point, the floor is yours to share with us. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
You, Commissioner, for responding. I expected to get a little bit more from everybody on the good afternoon. So I sent out to everyone the options or proposed recommendations with specific changes. But as I have been contemplating more and thinking about this more, as it relates to Article 18, I would be remiss if I did not share with the commission the importance, not that you don't believe that it is important, but the importance of Article 18 as it relates to employees and the governance of employees in the city of St. Louis. I believe that in order for the Charter Commission to walk away with valid changes that is going to benefit or be in the best interest of the city, it is critical for the commission to understand what a civil service system means, the importance of a civil service system, how our civil service system works, because this foundation is going to be really critical with what you put forth to the public from a vote. I don't believe that enough due diligence has really been given to Article 18 from the Charter Commission with regards to changes that really need to go forth. So therefore, based on all of this, and I hope we have more conversation around it, my first option would be, unless the commission is comfortable with that and that it has the understanding and all of the nuances of a civil service system, that the changes that are put forth may only need to be, at this point, the changes that are very, very clear with regards to pronouns, updated language, that's more modern, those types of things. But in the event that the Civil Service that the Charter Commission does not believe that that is the right approach, then I'll move forward with my recommendations. Any comments or conversation around that? I believe a valid question to the commission right now is your understanding of a civil service system and the intent of it and why it should exist.
I see Commissioner Grant.
Yeah, thank you. So I just, Sonia, I just wanted to understand, I saw the email that you sent about 30 minutes ago with the revised amendment. And I'm trying to understand, is that what you want us to consider now?
For consideration now, and this is the same document with the exception of just a few tweaks. This is the same document that I sent to the commission several months ago.
Okay.
So there has not been any major significant changes to the core of that document, but it is one that has already been received.
Okay.
But if in the body of the email that I sent out, I also raised the concern about whether or not the Charter Commission has time to really vet.
So one other question, just to so I can fully understand the attachment to the email, which you're saying is the same document that you sent a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But there's some yellow highlights on that document.
Yes.
What are those yellow highlights?
The yellow highlights are the recommendations that pretty much the significant recommendations that I'm proposing as options.
Okay. And would the yellow highlighted text be the only text that's been changed from what is just in the current charter?
With the exception of minor changes with regards to things that we've already agreed upon, with regards to pronoun changes, those language changes, those types of things.
Okay. I thank you. I just want to make sure I understood what you were circulating. I will say this, I hadn't fully digested your original proposal. And I greatly, you're the expert here in many ways, Sonia, on the system. And so, I would have great reservation about moving forward on something if you didn't feel it was fully vetted. But I'll just say that. So.
And so let me clarify when I say fully vetted. When I say fully vetted, I mean, that even though, I have knowledge of, personnel practices, those types of things, some that are probably a bit more progressive or modern. And so I value the fact that you believe that my input is important and is valued. But as we have done with other things that are being considered, to be changed, like, for example, the Department of Advocacy, that we came and talked to us, about that, because we are considering, my understanding is that we are considering changes, right? Based off of what other cities are doing. Having input from those cities or being able to educate me in some instances, as well as you, on how civil service systems work, how they operate, etc., I think is of value to the commission in deciding what it is that you do move forward with or that you don't move forward with. My experience with civil service is all of 18 months as a result of working for the city of St. Louis. My experience prior to that is based off of 15, 20 years ago, working for the federal government in a civil service system. So where I do have knowledge of HR, my breadth and depth of experience with civil service systems of recent is not really that broad. And so that's where I believe that the Charter Commission has some responsibility to ensure that they too are well abreast and have vetted and understand how this system should work. And if, there needs to be any core changes to it. And so that's why I make my initial comment. We hope that we can have more conversation around that, because to be quite honest, we have not spent a lot of time really discussing in detail Article 18.
Is there any additional discussion that any commissioners would like to bring up at this point?
Director Jenkins Gray, I just also want to understand, since I just received your update and haven't had a chance really to look at the highlighted portions and understand them in the context of the earlier proposals, etc., that we looked at as part of our working group 3 process itself. But let me just clarify that this document then is not the document that that was proposed by our fellow commissioner, Jasmine Nolan Eccles, but this is the original document that you submitted without those changes in it. Is that correct?
For clarity, the document that I just sent to you is the same document, and I can share with you the tweaks of it. It's not a lot. It's the same document that I submitted to the Charter Commission, as well as to Dr. Jasmine Nolan Eccles.
Who was a member of the working group 3, and so she received that at the same time. I understand that. But then there was a proposal that came, an amendment, a proposed amendment that came from Dr. Nolan Eccles to the commission. and I wanted to understand how it might or might not relate to this document so that we understand whether we're talking about the same document or two separate documents.
The only document that I can speak to or reference is what I have submitted to the Charter Commission.
Okay,
Document is what I have just sent to you.
okay. All right,
With-
that's, I was wanting to understand so that there was no confusion about which document we were referring to. And I do recollect the document that you provided to us as part of the working group earlier.
Yes.
But not being on the second working group call at which you presented, I didn't know whether there might have been an additional document that was submitted that I wasn't aware of.
No, what I have presented is what I have consistently
Okay.
presented throughout all of our meetings.
All right. And so if I understand correctly in a nutshell, one of the biggest differences between one of your major recommendation beyond the nomenclature and pronouns and all of those kinds of things that we have talked about already. The major issue was that you wish that you recommend that the personnel director or whatever that position is named remain within the civil service system, as opposed to although being a member of the mayor's cabinet, falling within the hiring and termination purview of the mayor. Is that correct?
That is one of the recommendations, but that's not the only one.
Okay, could you please clarify the rest of your recommendations just so that we understand them? That would be helpful.
So if you have the document,
Uh-huh.
the significant changes that I recommended several months ago start out in section 2, which is the purpose and basic requirement of this article. And the changes primarily are, it is more defined around the actual work that the Department of Personnel performs, that was not as clear, that is not currently as clear in Article 18.
So it's a process. You're talking about tightening processes, you're basically saying, right?
So if you want to take a moment and see if there are any questions about that.
Yeah, because it's hard for me, I guess, looking at this. I see the yellow highlighting, but I don't see any redlining or anything to be able to
And when
other than in the yellow areas, what's changed. That's why I'm
Yeah.
just trying to understand this.
So it came up in our last meeting, and I think Commissioner Grant was the one that had asked if I could send a red line. And I explained to him at that particular time that it would be difficult for me to be able to do that within the amount of time that was given for this meeting to occur. But so I had expected or thought that what would happen is that the commissioners would have Article 18 as it is, and this document, and can kind of look, between the two. But that came up the last time, and I said that I would not be able to provide that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. I remember it a little bit differently, but that's fine.
Mhm. So for the purposes of this meeting, section 2 pretty much states that it is the purpose of this article to provide a modern and comprehensive system of personnel administration for the city, whereby economy and effectiveness in the personal services rendered to the city, and fairness and equity to the employees and taxpayers of the city alike may be promoted. To accomplish this, the provisions of this article shall be liberally construed, and the following principles and shall be observed in basic requirements. And so that's pretty much the extent of section 2 currently written.
Well, I have no further questions at this point. If anybody else has questions they want to ask.
I see Commissioner Parliamentarian Garth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Director Gray,
Good afternoon.
and thank you for your presentation. I'm just going over your recommendations as I'm trying to speed read through most of it. Most of it's still the same. Just for public clarification, because I know that sometimes when people are applying for positions with the city, there are so many moving parts, of course, and that a lot of people don't understand that certain departments have their own HR versus the actual Office of Personnel, which handles, other aspects. So what this Article 18 speaks to does speak to just like the civil workers or civil, like streets, traffic, things of that nature, correct?
Mhm.
So, and of course, this has nothing to do with other departments that have their own HR and that they're able to handle whatever HR matters within those respective departments, correct?
They can do that within the scope of civil service rules, the charter, and administrative regulations. Because and I'm glad you asked that question, Commissioner Garth, because I think it is very important for the commission to understand that there is authority that falls within each operating department where they have the authority to make decisions that are not driven by the Department of Personnel. The Department of Personnel is the governing body. We are the compliance entity. We make sure that appointing authorities are following the rules when they take personnel actions and those types of things. But we do not have the authority to go in and tell an appointing authority how to manage their departments. And I think that is a misnomer amongst everyone, that the Department of Personnel has that level of authority. We do not. We cannot dictate who they hire. We cannot dictate who they fire. We cannot dictate what they pay. What we do, however, is ensure that whatever decisions are made, that it falls within the scope of the civil service rules, the charter, and administrative regulations. And when we find that it doesn't, then we are obligated by ordinance, by charter, by civil service rules, not to process or allow those types of actions to occur.
Thank you. I just wanted that to be thoroughly explained, as you and I both just agreed up and Bill stated that there are those little nuances that many may not be aware of, and I just want to make sure that that's clear, so that it's sort of just a even or like a clear canvas of understanding of just how everything works here. Those are just my only points that I wanted to make. Thank you so much, Director Gray.
And that is very important. And that's one of those nuances that I speak to about ensuring that the commission understands as it decides what it wants to move forward with and not move forward with, the factual data around how this system is supposed to work. Because I do believe, based off of feedback that is given, that there may be some misunderstandings with the level of authority that the Department of Personnel really has or does not have. So
in line with that, Director Jenkins Gray, I'm wondering if you can illuminate, this is kind of a little bit of an abstract question, but are there any nuances that you think in line with that are important that we as a commission understand that may not be evident based on the way that the charter language is currently written about the delineation of who is able to handle what from an HR perspective? Like, are there any things that you think that we need to know about as we deliberate on this specifically?
Well, as one point that has been brought up before, and I believe Commissioner Crossland has made the recommendation with regards to charter language being changed with regards to how the Department of Personnel administers providing candidates as an example to appointing authorities. The entire makeup of the civil service system is to ensure fairness and merit with regards to our hiring practices, with regards to how we pay people, etc. I think in your deliberation, it's critical to understand that the limits that are placed on how many candidates we refer, all of those types of things is to ensure fairness and that everything is based off of merit. And in doing that, there has to be, and I'm not necessarily saying that there needs to be 10 people on a list, etc. But to ensure fairness based off of how we rank and rate and evaluate candidates, we can't, for example, forward a slate of 20 candidates. There has to be some way that we have consistency across the city with how we refer candidates for consideration. Because even in our current system, where we only refer the top 6 candidates, the appointing authorities have authority to say, none of these 6 candidates meet my expectations. And I'd like to see more candidates. They have the authority to do that right now. So it is not that the Department of Personnel is saying, we're going to give you these top 6 candidates and you must choose someone from these 6. That's not the way that the system and process works. The charter just says that we have to refer the top 6, but it does not say that we cannot refer additional candidates, as an example. There are other nuances that, I believe that appointing authorities are of the opinion that they cannot recommend salary changes or salary modifications, etc. That's just not a true statement. They can make those recommendations to the Department of Personnel. And then based off of those recommendations, the Department of Personnel will do our analysis to see if what they're wanting to do are in compliance with our compensation ordinance or other practices that we have. And if they are, then we approve them. If they're not, then we don't approve. So it is not that personnel is this entity that is telling an appointing authority, you cannot do something. We're saying that you must do it, but it must be within these rules that exist, as another.
Okay, so you're kind of saying that there are other checks and balances that go on in terms of either ordinance or other things that may supersede what your office or what your role specifically is able to do in that type of circumstance. Okay.
Exactly. My office clearly operates by ordinances that are created, civil service rules that are created, administrative regulations that are created, driven by the charter.
Okay, that's helpful. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Nolan Eccles.
Director Gray, can you speak to the pay parity changes or information that you have found or that you've received, as well as the collective bargaining identification of whether or not these 2 items or these 2 things are necessary to be reflective in a charter?
Sure. I do have a part of my proposal for consideration and further vetting by the commission that I think it's section 31, which is included in the charter, creates parity between the police department and the fire department. It is my professional opinion that does not belong in the charter, because what that does or what it forces in union negotiations, that whatever the police are negotiating for police now must become the same for fire, regardless of whether or not it is a pay issue or something that should be done for fire. Both entities should be able to negotiate for their respective departments independent of one another. And so right now, the charter forces parity between the police department and the fire department.
Thank you. Can you speak to if you've seen or if you've identified any other charters with among your team when you all put together the recommendations? If collective bargaining is something you've seen reflective in charters related to civil service or just related to local city government prior to now, as we're recommending it as a commission?
Based off of the research, that I've seen in other cities that I have been involved in, I have not seen where collective bargaining is a part of a charter. I have seen where it has been written that collective bargaining, must be adhered to, or you cannot discriminate against it, and those types of things. But anything relative to collective bargaining being a part of and defining as for example, what comes to mind is Commissioner Grant's recommendation that the Board of Alder people now become a part of the collective bargaining process and must approve the entire collective bargaining agreement. No, I have not seen that written or a part of any charters anywhere.
Thank you, Director Gray.
Are there any other questions that, while we have Director Jenkins Gray, that she can answer for us?
I think I will ask one more question. Director Gray, I believe I forwarded all of the recommendations from the public related to civil service. We've kind of gotten them trickled in here in, I want to say, the past, probably since the beginning of time, but I believe that all of them are reflective in the changes that you and your team made during Work Group 3's interview and presentation. I believe those recommendations were covered in that. So I just wanted to make sure that for the public and for the record, that the recommendations as it relates to the Department of Personnel that are on our spreadsheet related to recommendations for this department have been identifiably addressed in the recommendations from the Director of Personnel.
As a point of order, I just wanted to mention that Vice Chair Sheridan is here, and so we can add his name to the roll. Secretary Intagliata.
Let me
Just so you know.
let me go back and ask my question earlier again of Dr. Jenkins Gray then, because I'm a little confused at that statement. I wanted to understand whether the report which just had been sent to us was the report that she submitted to us in the working group that had not in fact had the additional amendments attached to it. And now I'm hearing that those amendments were actually taken into account and were part of the report that was submitted to us in the working group originally, or were added to it later, or what?
So I'm going to answer because that was based on what I said. So what I said was the public has produced recommendations to us as a commission. And in the changes that Director Gray has recommended, I went through what the public is requesting, and they are reflective in the original interview that the Department of Personnel did with Work Group 3. So there's no additional changes needed. I can walk through those if need be, but like, for example, we have Kathleen Farrell here and some other members of the public that have produced recommendations related to this article that I wanted to make sure for the public to know that we have considered those, and the Director of Personnel and their department's recommendations already covered those changes. There were no additional changes needed or necessary.
So the report that came to us in the work group already had been vetted, and the changes that were on record then as recommended changes to personnel were included in the personnel department's recommendations to the working group. Is that what you're saying?
Dr. No, I can respond to that from my perspective.
Please.
The changes that I have recommended, I don't know if my understanding from what I believe I understood Dr. Nolan Eccles to say is that the recommendations that I had put forth, somewhere in the process, it was reconciled against what the public had submitted, in which I have not seen, and I do not know what the public has submitted. But an acknowledgement is being made that what I have presented also covers things that have been presented from the public, in which I do not have knowledge of, nor have I seen anything that has been submitted by the public.
It sounds incongruous to me. That's why I'm having difficulty reconciling the statements from the two of you, because they don't quite jibe. Maybe somebody else understands better than I do.
If someone understands better or can explain, that would be very helpful. I can only tell you what I have done. For my recommendations that I sent to Work Group 3 and the entire Charter Commission at the same time.
So Director Gray, what you're saying, I'm sorry I had to step away. What you're saying is correct. I'm saying that what the public has produced us doesn't require additional recommendations or any of the sort. They're pretty much addressed in what has been provided to us as a commission by the Department of Personnel when they did the Work Group 3 interview. And when she's now producing you with a document related to what her itemized changes would be, the public has sent us recommendations on their own via the website that are reflected. And so I'm trying to use my words correctly, they are reflective in her recommendations. There are concerns related to the civil service system. There are concerns related to how personnel is conducted. There are concerns related to what the personnel department or director or whomever is responsible for. The changes that she's speaking to now coincide with the changes that are coming from the public. If you all look at the requests, we have a report that was done by the League of Women Voters that speaks heavily related to this article, Article 18. We have recommendations from the public in our spreadsheet that speak to Article 18. And we've had some people at the public hearings and other places and our public meetings that have spoken to issues that are relative to Article 18. And I wanted to make sure that the public understands that the recommendations Director Gray has recently sent out that I'm looking at on my other screen reflect those changes as well. So it's all encompassing. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Any other questions or commentary around the subject?
If not, I can move on to my next option or recommendation.
Please.
And speak to that. And what I'm about to provide to you is coming surely from research with other cities, and it's being presented as an option only for consideration by the commission. And that is with regards to the way that our civil service system is currently constructed. In my research, I have learned that our civil service system is a bit different than others from a standpoint that within the city of St. Louis, with the exception of positions that are appointed by the mayor or the board of aldermen, or positions that are elected through the board of aldermen or their support staff, right? Every other position within the city of St. Louis is a part of a civil service, of the civil service system. In other cities, it was very difficult to find another city in which all positions in the city are a part of civil service. For example, in Little Rock, Arkansas, the only positions that are civil service are police and fire. For example, in Atlanta, positions that are senior level or have management responsibilities are considered unclassified, which is different from an appointment, but they're considered unclassified. And then your other positions within that city are considered civil service. So you asked what is the difference between unclassified versus classified? Classified positions are those in which are protected by civil service, which are driven by competitive measures, etc. Unclassified pretty much means that these positions are at will. They're driven by, they don't have all of the protections by civil service, as an example. So I believe that a conversation is warranted to discuss whether or not this is something that the commission wants to consider. If it is, there's much more vetting that needs to be done by our legal department, but I did not want to engage them in doing this level of work if it is something that the commission is not interested in pursuing or having additional information. So I'm really putting this forth as a point of discussion, as an option of consideration, more so than anything that I am saying, yes, we should do this, and I'm recommending that we do this. And that can be found on page 3, under section 5, alphabets K and L. Okay. Any questions at this point?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. So moving on to page number 10. I think this is significant here. The current charter, Article 18, Section 10, has the description of the experience of the Director of Personnel, written as 5 years of experience only. That, in my opinion, is in conflict with our current classification standards for the HR manager. The HR manager only requires 5 years of experience. So based off of that, clearly you would believe that the director overall of personnel, the years of experience should be much higher than 5 years. In researching other cities, the lead HR person, typically, the years of experience are somewhere between 7 years and 10 years. And so therefore, I am recommending that the years of experience for the Director of Personnel be raised from 5 years to 10 years. And that I have also gone in and defined a bit further what that looks like. What types of things should this person have had management responsibilities for? And so that's where you'll see that the 7 years managing a minimum of the 4 functional areas that the Director of Personnel for the City of St. Louis currently has responsibility for. Okay.
Director Sonia Jenkins Gray, I'll say I don't have a question, but I will affirm that based on my research, that seems to be pretty in line with other cities of our size having that type of language. So that seems pretty appropriate based on what I see listed here.
Okay.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Grant. I think he has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, it's very difficult without a red line, but if you go through, there are a lot of these changes that are not yellow highlighted in this document. And
for example,
well, for instance, the provisions removing there's a deletion of the provisions on appointment and examinations.
okay, tell me what page you're on, please, Commissioner.
Yeah, it's so you've reordered all the sections. So it's an original section, section 3, paragraph D. That's now gone. So I would just say, based on my experience with civil service, there are some significant changes happening here, including I'm not saying whether good or bad. I think there are arguments both ways, but this provision, for instance, removing a management team from the classified service, essentially removing them from civil service protections, making them at will, that's a substantial change. And that would affect a large percentage, a significant percentage of workers in the city of St. Louis. And I don't know how they'd react. So I would just, I would want everybody to consider this draft very carefully. And it is, I really wish we had a red line, because it is hard, because sections have been moved around and language has been changed and deleted, and it's, you really have to go through it carefully to understand all the
I
changes.
totally agree with you, and I had hoped the commission would have taken a little bit more time to, because like I said, this document was sent 3 months ago. But I do want to go back, because I want to clarify something, because you said that it was not highlighted. I agree with you, and it is highlighted. It's highlighted under section, it is highlighted under section 5. And I just went over that to make sure that the commission was aware of the significance of this option. And again, I really need to say option, and I need the commission and the public to understand that. These are not things that I am saying that we must do. These are things that I'm offering to the commission for consideration. And you are right, Commissioner Grant, that is a major change, a big change. And that is why I highlighted it, to bring to the attention of the commission that this would be a significant change for the city. And so the commission may decide, you know what, we really don't want to go that way. Or you may come back and you may say, you know what, we may want to consider it. And I'm hoping, if nothing more, that the commission gathers from this conversation is that any change that we make to Article 18, the commission really needs to have a thorough understanding of the implications of that change, the impact on civil service, and what that means for the city going forward. It's really critical and important that the commission really give due diligence and time to understanding what all of this really means. And so, you know, if nothing else, I hope that this forces the commission to really read through Article 18 in its entirety and establish an understanding of what it is that we really are currently doing in order to make recommendations on how the commission feels we should move forward.
Okay, let's see. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Nolan Eccles.
Director Gray, can you explain the implications of what Commissioner Grant is mentioning or he's recognizing as a concern?
Sure. The implications are dual. From an employee standpoint, right? If something occurred that changes their status with the protection of civil service, most employees are not going to be amenable to that. They're just not. They're going to see it as something that is being taken away. They are going to see it potentially as an act to dismantle civil service. That's why the recommendation as written, or the option, not recommend, the option as written, is driven towards those positions within the city that are really senior level positions that impact the overall operation of the city. So it is not something where positions that are professional in nature, accountants, engineers, et cetera, or in positions that may be in the refuse department or police or fire, or any of those types of positions are being considered. It is being considered around those positions that do have direct impact on how the city operates. And so I think amongst the commission there, you know, that is the conversation that should be had. And that is, what do we believe from an employment structure standpoint, the best structure in order to ensure efficiency with getting services provided, with getting accountability in place, etc. So, you know, those are the two vast differences that I believe that the commission needs to consider.
in order to consider it, don't we need to understand what is now compared to what would be if this option was considered by the commission? So can you tell me what the current structure is? And based on what Commissioner Grant is saying, you just gave us the implications, but what the immediate change or the negative or positive impacts or effects would be? Because it's not clear to me if the management or directors are under civil service or within the civil service system, what the negative impacts of that actually are.
So the current structure is such that all positions, as I mentioned earlier, with the exception of those that are appointed by the mayor, and those support staff to support the Board of Aldermen, alder people. Every other position within the city of St. Louis are part of the civil service system. So that means pretty much your deputy directors, your commissioners, your managers, your superintendents, all are part of civil service. The impact for that in other cities that I had conversations with, and their logic or rationale around certain positions not being a part of the civil service was really more fluid around accountability, around being able to establish and set performance standards that may not necessarily be a part of the civil service system right now. And for them, that regards to the way that accountability and performance and those types of things with being able to, ensure services for their city. And again, I put this forth not as a final recommendation, but something to generate conversation for the commission around what it is that you believe may be in the best interest of the city of St. Louis moving forward with regards to this particular case.
Director Jenkins Gray, to help me with some, just in my mind, be able to visualize this, you talk about all of the employees other than the appointees being part of civil service. How many positions is that? And then of that, how many positions are we talking about that would, if this kind of a shift were implemented, how many would no longer be part of social services? What percentage? Rough number. Doesn't have to be that.
So, okay. So, right now you can, I estimate 5,000 plus employees positions that are part of civil service. As a result of a change, if I estimate that of the 5,000 employees, 20% are management level positions. And so that would probably be, the difference there. Without having firm numbers, I don't see more than 20% of our workforce being senior level positions. So you're pretty much talking about 20% of 5,000, just as an estimate. Okay. So I'm hoping that Commissioner
I'd like to
Garth.
recognize Commissioner Garth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Gray, because I said I know that we're all just kind of getting these, of course this was sent, just prior before the meeting, so we're still just kind of digesting a lot of this all at once. And I see that there's the discussion is being generated, but this seems like there are still some aspects that are causing a little bit of confusion. So I just want to make sure that we're understanding that, like you said, these are just recommendations that you're just proposing, or rather just opening up for a conversation. They're not necessarily ones where you're trying to make a final proposal, and that you're also not, because I think what's happening now is that there seems to be there's almost two aspects going on. And so I, as you're the expert and the director of personnel, I kind of want us to really just zero in and focus on your definitions and what you have sent, especially, you know, with us having gotten this, you know, just shy before the meeting began. Because it's a lot. And of course, when we're dealing with personnel and everything, and I know with in the expertise of course of Commissioner Grant, I know that this is a lot of moving parts, and whatever decisions that we make, whatever verbiage that we change or whatever, can and most likely affect a great number of managers or directors or, you know, all sorts of employees. So as we're having this discussion, because I made mention that we wanted to understand that this is the Department of Personnel, and not like, you know, the other departments that operate kind of like on their own island. We know that there are lots of departments within the city that operate on their own island, and that's an argument for, you know, we can kick that can down the road. But when you were reviewing a lot of the different cities that develop these or have these in place, may I ask, like, do you know exactly how many cities you've spoken to, and just kind of get an idea as to how many were spoken to, and just where the ideas were just kind of all kind of meshed together?
Sure. And it is varied amongst all of them. I can say that there was not a city that I spoke to where all positions are a part of civil service as our city is.
Okay.
Cities that I spoke to, the city of Atlanta, in which I partnered with, and I used them in a number of situations for, you know, networking, etc. Little Rock, New York City, Delaware, Oklahoma, were the 5 that I used sort of like as benchmarks. There are other cities that I did take a look at, and it's very easy research to do. You know, you just go out to pull up that city's HR department, put in, you know, reference to their charter and unclassified positions and classified positions, etc. And pretty much the data is there. But those are some of the cities. Well, the cities that I mentioned are specific ones that I took a look at.
And with regards to, well, maybe that's kind of opening a bit of a can of worms, because I know that later tonight we know that there is a budget discussion going on that involves the earnings tax, and of course our city is unique in that we have that, and again, that's another subject for another day. But with that being said, when you're talking about classified employees, are you talking about like just remind me again exactly what you meant by those that are classified? Like, I just want to make sure that before I ask my next question, I want to make sure I understand that.
Okay. So classified positions are those that are a part of the civil service system.
Okay.
Which is 5,000 plus employees for the city of St.
Louis. Okay. Yeah, that gives me a little bit more to chew on now. But I definitely want to take a little bit more time. Myself, I don't know if anyone else on the call needs to, but I know for myself, I really want to just dig into this new what you sent here to us, just to really make sure that I'm ingesting a lot of this. from what I've seen so far, I have seen that a lot of this does align with what some cities are doing, and then others, I just kind of want to just have the data to sort of back up what I'm reading.
Mhm.
Because again, I just don't want any of us to walk away from this on a just sort of rubber stamp this, because this is what happens when we get a lot of cooks in the kitchen and everybody adds something to the soup. So I just want to make sure that I have my own personal understanding. But that's all my point there.
Yeah.
One of the things, with all due respect, Commissioner Gar, I do want to go back and reiterate
Mhm.
that this is not the first time that this document has been sent to the Charter Commission.
Of course.
I went back and checked, and I've actually sent it, the same document twice.
Okay.
To the commission overall. So, and as I mentioned before, the only changes that I pretty much made is the point of discussion that we're having right now with regards to classified versus unclassified positions.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and can I just, to make absolutely sure I understand, going back to this question of classified and unclassified, and were we to move the 20% you're talking about into unclassified, 1,000, potentially, let's say we did that we moved 1,000 people into that category, that would be the recommendation. Your recommendation still, however, would be that the director of the HR department remain classified within the civil service system.
Not necessarily. I believe that, under those pretenses that that's open for discussion.
Okay.
My recommendation. Now, this is a firm recommendation. The other, I have presented options. And I have, had additional conversations with the mayor to express my reasons behind my recommendation. Remain the same, and that is because of continuity with personnel issues, that there is some stability from one mayor to another mayor. And again, my recommendation is not being made because of the current mayor. The current mayor, I have complete confidence in her desire, what she wants to accomplish, how she wants to accomplish it, the progressiveness that she wants to move the city, the direction that she wants to move the city in. So this is not being driven at all based off of our current. It is, however, being driven by future potential future administrations that may use this position, in which a civil service system says that you're not supposed to do with regards to political influence. I researched with other cities and talked to chief human resources officers in those departments. Their comments to me were, I wish we had what St. Louis has. And they give me examples of how they are pulled in, and political influence begins to drive their success or non-success in their role. So that is what this is being driven by, more so than anything else whatsoever.
Okay. Did you, Director Sonia Jenkins Gray, I keep wanting to call you Sora, but I'm not going to do that. Can you potentially, are there any other pieces that you think are really important for us as we review your document? I think we got to the bottom of the highlighted portion, but perhaps there are other pieces that you'd like for us to consider.
The only other thing, we talked about parity briefly. As I'm looking through, no, it was just section 31. It was section 5, section 2, and section 10, the changes of the requirements for the director of personnel. Other than that, there were not really any other significant changes other than the ones that I had mentioned. Where I deleted something, I put in deleted. or no change.
I see that at the bottom of the document with fire department. So,
Exactly. So there was nothing else that I really went through and just deleted out of the chart.
okay.
Okay.
With that, are there any other pieces that you need to share to wrap up your presentation, or any other questions or comments from any commissioners at this time? Thank you, Director Gray, for your presentation and for sharing with us and going through your document. It's much appreciated. And because that wasn't necessarily an item that we needed to vote on, we will move into our number 4 item on the agenda. So that next agenda item is a discussion of the Board of Aldermen's process and timeline for amendment review. We have invited non-voting ex officio member of the commission, Director Christine Ingracia, who I know I saw her on, to talk through this item and give us a little bit more depth into that space. Director Ingracia requested that this portion be closed. So I will now entertain a motion that this meeting be closed and that all records and votes, to the extent permitted by law, pertaining to or resulting from this closed meeting session be closed under Missouri Revised Statute Section 610.021 subsection 1 for the purpose of discussion of legal actions.
So moved.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Thank you.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. I believe we need a roll call vote, Secretary Intagliata, if you are still, I believe you're still on. Yes.
You actually do not.
We do not. Okay.
Just it's a simple majority to do that.
I'm sorry. You do need a roll call vote to
Oh.
enter closed session under the Sunshine Law.
Oh, fair enough then.
And so, Asia, if you could put them back here, we can get Secretary Intagliata to call the roll.
Will do.
Okay. Deja vu. Is everyone back? I believe we do need a roll call vote.
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind, Secretary Intagliata.
No problem. The motion has been made and seconded. Chair Bobo, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan,
Aye.
Parliamentarian Garth,
Aye.
Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight, Commissioner Grant,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Aye.
Commissioner Riley. Aye. Very good. Commissioner Riley. Secretary Intagliata votes aye.
Thank you.
So that passes. Thank you.
Okay. I believe now we will be moved to a closed session. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you. So now we are back in public session. Would anyone like to take the floor to speak?
I will.
Okay.
So, in light of our understanding that we need to submit our recommendations to the Board of Aldermen, that will then be passed, considered as an ordinance, with a potential deadline to do so by July 9th, we need to discuss our timeline going forward for drafting charter amendments and which need to be published 10 months into our term, which is July 14th. I'm sorry, June 14th, correct? And then holding a public hearing, giving the public at least 2 weeks to review the proposed draft, and then having adequate time to take the input of the public and deliver a proposed ordinance to the board by July 9th. So I would
Yes.
entertain suggestions on how we do that.
Yeah. So Chris, thanks for that. I spent some time last night, and I went back to our 50 recommendations, and I went back and highlighted those that from my notes and from various votes and memory were things that everybody largely coalesced around. So, you know, take that for what it is, but I think it was a pretty accurate portrayal. And based on that, we were going to have this, you know, massive pile up here even quicker than we thought. And it becomes a pretty manageable, palatable list of 6 items. And I also think, given the 6 items, there's one of which is largely drafted now. It's a more feasible lift. And so what I did is, and I would have shared the document from the 50 if our city Zoom had access in Australia where I am, but I don't, so I'll do it by phone. But it was the election items that pretty much everybody was in favor of, throwing out the one that wasn't. The second one would be changing Board of Alder to City Council and giving them the ability to increase the budget, modify and modernize pronoun use, increase unadvertised purchase threshold to $10,000 or by ordinance, create a Department of Transportation, and the right to organize and bargain collectively. Those 6 items, by and large, seem to have great coalescence and agreement. And looking at it, they seem, you know, relatively, and I'm no lawyer, but relatively easy to draft, particularly because Commissioner Grant's already drafted largely the last one. If we wanted to add one item further, we probably could, and that might be a thorough, quick debate of light or heavy E&A, or perhaps the personnel issue. But given the tenor of our previous conversation, I'm not sure that could be done quickly. But with those 6, you have a pretty attractive, pretty good group of recommendations as substantial charter changes that would greatly benefit the city of St. Louis and its citizens. So, and those are there to be done now. And it sounds like now is an operative term. So.
And I just want to, in responding to that, my office has already got 3 of the 6 of those drafts ready to talk to the proponents about, and is planning to reach out tomorrow to set up appointments for discussions with those proponents before the drafts go to the commission as a whole. I think the Department of Transportation may be the one that is not yet complete.
So we're 50% there. That's great. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Crossland for comment.
I'd just like to add that we are going to tonight discuss the mayor and the city offices, which we haven't had a chance to discuss in more detail and vote possible amendments forward or for further interest. And I suspect that there's some there that we'll want to add to that list.
Yeah. So, and Anna, so what I will do is I will email everyone the document that we all saw and talked about at our last meeting that I highlighted. And again, it's pretty straightforward. Anything that we add, we got to add like now. So, right? I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and that's why I'm saying that I know that's on the agenda for tonight so that we can do catch up with it. And then we do still have the issue if we choose to go forward with some or all of Director Jenkins Gray's recommendations slash options.
And I'm sorry, my team has corrected me. The one other draft that is ready to go is the pronoun change that you all seem to agree on.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
4 of 6 is there. That's great. 2/3.
Director Christina
Great.
Gracia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. City Councilor Hamilton, can you let us know what is on your list of items that you have drafts of for the voting members to review?
So we were going in order of approval. And what I do know is the first ones that were approved. So I think the Department of Transportation may be drafted and I just may need to be corrected. But the first 2 were about the Board of Aldermen's name change of budget. And then one of them was about the Department of Transportation. And I guess Nancy or Eddie can help me if I'm missing other ones. But of the ones that Secretary Intagliata mentioned, the only one that I have not yet reviewed is the one regarding the Department of Transportation so far.
All of the election ones are done. With the 1 through 8 and 13 through 18 of the discussion items are there's a draft of each of those.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Nolan Eccles, who has her hand raised.
I sent an email here recently about some of the recommendations that I believe I posed that were not on the document and that are also that we haven't discussed or we haven't yes, they weren't on the document. So I want to know what we're doing related to the process of addressing or voting on the recommendations that we need to take to the public hearing and opening the floor for discussion related to what our next steps are going to be.
Point of order. Germaneness, we were talking about the matter of how to move forward with how to present all things to the board. We weren't talking about actually that per se.
So I'm going back to the germane action in which I was asking pertaining to the recommendations that are not present, as Commissioner Crossland did and other commissioners have communicated recommendations that have not been addressed. That is in fact germane. So point of information, at what time are the
criteria that we were using? Yeah, Commissioner Nolan Eccles, the criteria that I used was that the vast majority were in agreement with. I don't know if there was round agreement with those. I'd be interested to review them again, but I don't see how we can do that and meet this timeline given our current meeting schedule unless we change it.
Correct, which is what I'm asking. So the point of order that I'm raising is our recommendations have not been taken to the public. And in order to bucket them the way we're insisting on bucketing them, per your recommendation, Commissioner Tagliata, they would need to go before the public first, correct?
I believe that's the process, yes.
Okay.
Can we hear potentially from Charter Commission staff or either Counselor Hamilton? Because I guess I'm unclear on next steps or what we need to do.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Yeah, so it sounds as if Commissioner Nolan Eccles is saying that some of what she proposed is not included. I don't personally have recollection of what she's referring to, but was there anything that wasn't included that we need to include, or how do we proceed? Especially given, again, our tight timeline.
So I have just forwarded you all from the Charter Commission email address, the email thread that Commissioner Nolan Eccles is referring to. She had made a recommendation about changing the article that created the Charter Commission, for example. And
okay.
You'll see in the email that was just sent that Eddie is part of this loop, and I will actually read, he had sent out this chart on April the 17th at about 2:00. And the text of the email said, please review the proposals you were involved in developing and let us know if they have been correctly reproduced and reflected or need updating. And Commissioner Nolan Eccles' response was, thank you very much for combining the recommendations into a single document. And then on Monday, May 27th, we received a email saying that this recommendation was left out, and there may have been some other recommendation that I'm missing, but I've just forwarded you all the email communication so that you can have it in total.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Grant?
So before I'm thinking about Commissioners Intagliata's kind of proposal on what to move forward, and I think on one hand we need to maximize what we move forward so the public can consider it on the absent majority support among the members of the commission. But on the other hand, I am well aware of the sort of logistical limits that involved in drafting, and in particular the burden that's placed on the city councilor's office. And so I just want to make sure I understand, the timeline. So I am looking at the provision in the amendment on in the charter on the commission that says, we have to publish a draft 10 months into our term, and then we have to have a public hearing after the publication, and the draft of the proposed amendments have to be made publicly available no less than 2 weeks prior to the required public hearing. So I guess working backwards from that, do we have a public hearing scheduled to consider the draft? And if not, or what is that date? And if not, what should be that date?
So the only thing, I'll jump in and then I'll let the Charter Commission staff or Counselor Hamilton mentions that piece of it. But to my recollection, the last time we brought this up, I think we just specified the week. So I think we said like the week of July 15th. I don't know that we specified a day.
So I would say that that's impossible.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Because we cannot, Ms. Hamilton's office, I think she has incredible people working for her, but I just don't think they can create
You mean they
drafts
can't
of
bend
everything.
time?
Yeah. So what I would propose, we are looking, I think, to maximize the time, have a public hearing the last week of June, right? We have, which would be, we have to have a draft published by June 14th, right? And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't maximize that time.
Mhm.
Which means we have one more meeting between now and the 14th, which is next Monday, right?
Right.
So that I would say that and I'm going to talk this through, and then maybe I'll put it in a motion, but I'm happy to entertain thoughts on it. You know, that there'd be a direction that by that June 3rd meeting, we're going to have to give instructions to Ms. Hamilton, and I want to know if it's feasible to have draft done by June 14th so it can be published, and that we then schedule a meeting. Well, 2 weeks would be June 28th, or you're thinking maybe July 1st, which would give us a week or so. I mean, you got the 4th of July, unfortunately, in there, but about a week to consider the public input and then make any modifications. We're going to have a final meeting, right, to then approve something to give to the board. That's a very compressed timeline, but that would be the maximum timeline.
Can you just restate the date and the action that you're proposing happens on the date? Because I'm confused about what you're.
I'm sorry, what, Sheena?
Can you just say the date that you want a thing to happen and the thing that you want to happen on that date so that I understand?
Yeah, so
what you're saying.
So okay, so we have to vote on June 3rd as to what proposals Ms. Hamilton's office is going to draft, or that we're going to put into a draft to be published on June 14th. Then we have to wait 2 weeks to have a public hearing, which we could do on June 28th. I think that's a Friday. That's not optimal. We could do July 1st. And then almost immediately after that public hearing, it's the week of July 4th, we're going to have another meeting among the commission to make a final vote. I mean, don't we need 6 votes to put anything into an ordinance, and to give Ms. Hamilton enough time to make any modifications to the draft to get to the board by July 9th.
And just to clarify, that's July 9th by 12 p.m.
I propose that. I'm open to like other ideas, but that's there's certain limits that are set by the charter that we have to follow. So.
Well, Commissioner Grant, I think that goes back to my previous point. I think that that gives us our June 3rd meeting, which is coming up imminently, and to thrash out 1, possibly 2 issues, and that's it. Sounds like the city councilor's office is doing a great job drafting and being proactive here. But I think that the job for us today is to say next Monday when we meet, which issue or issues, and that's probably 2, not plural, are we going to thrash through and have a clear agreement on, and say this is also going to go for drafting, because that's our window, and that's probably the only things we can add.
The timeline I just proposed, I mean, there's almost no time, given the July 4th holiday, people, there's almost no time for the commission to meet after the public hearing.
Agreed.
I just don't know. I mean, I guess we could push out the commission meeting to July 8th, but that's almost no time to modify a proposed ordinance. Now, I'll say this. I mean, I say once we submit a proposed ordinance to the board. I mean, obviously amendments could be made at the board, although I think our position should be, we as the commission have been charged, with submitting these recommendations that the people of the city of St. Louis voted to create the commission, that the Board of Alder people should accept our recommendations as a whole and should not make changes to our proposals absent some sort of, legal error. That would be my
And
position.
I would concur with you that we do ask for that. And if we get into amendments that we propose, we are going to create a whole new set of timeline problems and problems in general. So again, I think we can add one more issue here, and if we can agree that we'll thrash it through and fully agree on June 3rd, we can do it. Otherwise, we've done pretty good work here. But if there's one or two things that we're sure we can get done on June 3rd, that's great.
Commissioner Grant, did you want to follow up to that?
I guess my one other question for Ms. Hamilton's office would be, is if if we vote on June 3rd, how much time do you need? I mean, it's hard to say because we don't know how much we're giving you. How much time would you need?
That's the point, right? Is if we're talking about the 6 things that we're talking about and maybe one other, then and the proponents of those, the movants, actually make themselves available for us to make sure that, we review it with them, then we will make every effort, and I think we can meet that deadline. But if you say instead that we want to move forward 50 things,
Right.
then the answer was always no, even if we were talking about this in, October, right?
Mhm.
So it did not change by the timeline. It's just an it's like,
Okay, Commissioner Crossland? I think you just muted yourself. Commissioner Crossland, I believe you just muted
Anna,
yourself.
you're on mute.
Just to clarify, I know we have an agenda item tonight for the mayor's office and the city offices and employees. And so that we're going to deal with. And then we're talking about one more item on the 3rd of June, because if there's one more item on the 3rd of June that we haven't put to bed yet, that it's E&A.
Commissioner Crossland, did you want were you asking a question or were you just making
I was trying to clarify to make sure, since we're talking about 6 plus 1, are we talking about 6 plus the mayor's and a city offices thing that we're doing tonight, plus one more June the 3rd, or are we talking about 6 plus only one more?
Well, Commissioner Crossland, I'd say if we can get full, near unanimous agreement tonight on the mayor's items, then that would be an addition, and it's subject to then Councilor Hamilton telling us they can draft it. And if that's the case, then we could try to cram another one in on June 3rd, which could be E&A. It seems like that's the one that's captivated us the most. But that's probably pushing the outer limits, but that's great. Okay. So if we can get that done tonight, if we can get that done tonight, fantastic.
I mean, I still need to present on the board of E&A. I mean, I will say this, if as far as elimination, that idea that's been floated, if we wish to pursue that, I mean, I will work diligently. I have a pretty good outline of a draft. It's not, it can be done. I think, there are some questions we really need to consider. Mr. Boyd raised a very good one last time about, review of contracts and things like that. But but, I'm willing to work diligently on that to try to have a draft.
Okay. Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
I think that there should have been a point of order raised, but it was not. I want to know what the question on the floor is, and if we've had a motion and we've had a second on the floor related to the item on the agenda, because we're going back and forth related to what we're going to discuss or not going to discuss. And I want to know if someone has a recommended motion that we are to be concentrated on at the current moment. So I'm calling for the question.
I will make a motion. I move that on June 3rd, we vote as to which proposals will, asking Ms. Hamilton's office to draft. On June 14th, that Ms. Hamilton will publish that draft. On July 1st, we have a public hearing, and on July 8th, we have a commission meeting with a final vote.
A second.
Okay.
are you there, Secretary Intagliata?
I am indeed. Would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, please.
Very good. Chairman Bobo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan is, I believe, left the meeting. Parliamentarian Garth,
Aye.
the Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight, Commissioner Grant,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Aye.
Commissioner Riley, and Secretary Intagliata is an aye. That's 6 ayes, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, so the next point of order on our agenda, I believe, is a discussion, which is what Commissioner Crossland was referencing just a moment ago, regarding the mayoral and executive branch recommendations. So we have been able to review some notes that were provided during the Work Group 3 meeting on January 10th. Does anyone from Work Group 3 have items they wish to raise, or does the mayor's designee care to speak? And I see a nodded head. So, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair Bobo, and I will, if it is helpful, go through the recommendations that were made at the January 10th meeting. I will note that I think some of them overlap with other recommendations, and in those places, please feel free to speed me up or clarify whether or not these recommendations overlap with previous recommendations or those that have been provided.
Yeah.
Another.
Yeah, I'm just Mr. Boyd, maybe I'm trying to figure out how to be able to do that. What I did was I went back and I reviewed the notes, including those from the mayor's presentation, plus other items that came up in conversations, etc., about different items that pertain to city offices, etc. So where something is slightly different or concurs with what Mr. Boyd will mention, then I'll pipe up at that point, and at the end, I can do a quick wrap up of any items that weren't part of his presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Crossland. The first recommendation put forward by the mayor, I think, is one that is already before the commission, and that is modernizing pronouns for the mayor. We have women at the helm of all of our branches in city government, and our charter should reflect the time that we live in. The second recommendation is updating the temporary disability language. This language, if was crafted in a time when there was no email, no telephones that were readily available, and a literal interpretation would require the mayor to designate the president of the Board of Aldermen anytime that she went out of town on an extended business. I was out of town and helping to lead a delegation with Commissioner Sheridan in Germany 2 years ago, and under, I think, a literal interpretation of the charter, it could be argued that, you know, the mayor should be designating the president of the board when she is out of town doing business on behalf of the city. And I think incorporating the language under the U.S. Constitution would be appropriate here, and also just kind of realize how we're able to operate in modern times. In terms of changes, additional changes, I've talked about the pronouns being modernized, not just in the mayor's office, but throughout the entire city charter. The area that I think from an operations standpoint, from an executive standpoint, that is most important to our office is providing consistency around critical accountability authority. And I think some of the authority that's not directly kind of appointed to the mayor is a reflection of state control over the police department and some other positions that came about after the initial charter was created. So currently, the fire chief, the police chief, they report to the director of public safety. There's virtually no city in the United States where you have police chiefs that report to a director of public safety. They typically are reporting either directly to a mayor or places where there's a city council form of government or a city manager. So they typically do not have a layer of authority in between the executive branch or the branch of government that's in charge of executive functions. Fire chief, also, I mean, we're talking about two departments. Police department accounts for $230 million this year, $226 million next year. Fire department accounts for $100 million. It makes sense for departments of this importance to report directly to the mayor's office. The airport director should be acknowledged in the charter, and it is an appointment that the mayor makes, but I believe it is actually, it probably could be more explicit in the charter. And the director of personnel is also another area that the mayor believes should be appointed directly by the mayor. Almost every organization that has an HR department, that HR department is appointed by the executive and accountable to the executive. And I think this, the mayor's recommendation is not a reflection of the current Department of Personnel, and Ms. Jenkins Gray, I think, has done an admirable job, but the department that she inherited, I think, had a lot of challenges. And some of those challenges have to do with a previous director and department that was insulated from direct accountability in the form of an executive that could replace them or ask for more from those departments. Under the current charter, our personnel director can be removed only for misfeasance and malfeasance. And I don't think that is, I think that can create situations where a department simply just does not, is not as responsive to the needs of the city as it should be. So I want to help illuminate that kind of need for accountability. I want to talk about the hiring process that Director Gray inherited when she came into the department, just to illustrate how challenging of a department that she inherited. So the department had an applicant management tracking system called Sigma. Sigma was so old that the developer stopped upgrading and maintaining Sigma in 2003. So this system, like I said, was outdated literally 21 years ago. Sigma could only be used by 6 employees at one time, or else it essentially would crash. And it had no online connectivity. So let me, when we talk about personnel department and the downstream effects of inefficiencies in the personnel department, I think there are a lot of changes that can be debated on both sides as to philosophically, should this department have oversight or budgeting power? I can tell you without a doubt that inefficiencies in the personnel department are felt by St. Louisans, either in the form of short-staffed departments or places where the city of St. Louis has to contract out services in lieu of hiring staff. So let me walk you, like I said, through the hiring process before that Director Gray inherited and has made steps towards bringing into the 21st century. So departments would submit a request for a position through paper, a physical paper form, and it would have 24 fields. That piece of paper would be mailed or interoffice to the Department of Personnel. And after verifying that there was money for the position, that the position was on their TO, that position or that paper form would be taken once a week in a stack, and it would be entered in manually by someone in the personnel department in the Sigma system. And like I told you, only 6 people could use this system at one time, or else it would crash. The online posting portal was separate from Sigma. So even though the position would be approved in Sigma, they'd have to go to a separate online website to actually upload the job. When people applied for the job, they would have to print the applications from that online portal and go back to Sigma and manually type in those applications into Sigma. So that just shows you we've gone from paper to an old system to a website to printing from that website back into Sigma, where they would have to actually go through and go through an evaluation portal in Sigma to rank those employees. And once those rankings came out, they would mail a list or send a list to the departments, and also mail of the ranked candidates. And they would also mail notification to the applicants that they had 5 days to respond to the department for an interview. As you can imagine, mailing people things that they need to reach out to another department for an interview in a job market with low unemployment has not been successful. So like I said, that is just getting to the interview process. So you're hoping that someone gets mail and someone responds to departments. And if a department is not able to get all of those responses, they have to request additional names. And there are other wrinkles to this old system that I'm leaving out just for sake of brevity. All of that is to say, like I said, when you set a standard that someone can only be removed from misfeasance and malfeasance, you create the opportunity for departments to not become as responsive as they should be. So as I stated, and I do want to reiterate, Director Gray has recently launched, helped lead us through the overhaul of this process with a new website that streamlines a lot of these processes. But for the previous director having an illness, we would not have had the opportunity to have appointed Director Gray and bring in someone who reimagined and made the department more responsive to our needs. So like I said, I think it is important, and the mayor feels it's important that there are these places of accountability, direct accountability, where she can, or the next mayor can hire these critical positions directly, so that that no one has to inherit the situation that Director Gray had to inherit. And like I said, I think this is an area where people can really feel the impact of a department that was shielded from from the types of accountability that every other department in city government has experienced. The rest of the recommendations, a lot of them are just updating the current names of departments. I think you all have covered the municipal election date change. I will say that our administration was a part of the first administration that had a 14-day transition period, and I would not wish that upon any administration, and don't think that is good government to set any administration up to be elected on April 6th and come into office on April 20th. And I think the other, like I said, recommendations have largely been covered by other working groups. And we'll entertain any questions that you guys may have.
And
Commissioner Crossland?
yeah, before that, maybe let's see if I can get the document up.
Okay.
Where? No, it's not. Where on this one? Where do I find share on this one? Can I share a document on this? That's what I'm looking for.
I believe you should have the ability to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm looking. I just don't see it here. Where would it be on this screen? That's what I'm struggling with.
It should be at the
on the bottom of share screen that's green.
Green. Oh, there it is. I see it. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay, can people see that?
Yes. We see proposed draft changes. Is that what you intended to?
Right. Okay. What I did here was I went through previous discussions and documents and consolidated discussions and made some recommendations here also that in the spirit of trying to work through in the kind of bundle approach that we did at the last meeting, so that we had something in front of us that we could vote on and decide if there were items that we wanted to move forward or not. What I would suggest that Mr. Boyd do is, if there's anything that he sees as we're going through this that might be in conflict with what he's just said, etc., he should point it out. But there's 7 items here under global change recommendations that are pretty clear, I think, in terms of what they are. I say all annual salaries will be set by ordinance and not specified in the charter. That makes sense to me, at least. And then it says job titles. This one may be controversial. I don't know. Job titles, job descriptions, and qualifications shall be set by ordinance and not necessarily included in the charter. I mean, it's a problem. You know, we come up with something and all of a sudden we need different job description for it, and suddenly it's a problem with charter. And then strike all references to the Department of Welfare and add new language pertaining to the Department and Director of Human Services. Then remove remaining references to the Malamphy Fund. then remove references to hospitals since the city no longer manages any of them. There is, according to the charter, a Department of Health and Hospitals, and we need to take hospitals out of that. Then remove charter requirements that all public publishing in the city must be done in 2 daily newspapers, one of which is German, and provide for alternate, including electronic public postings. That probably could be done by ordinance also. And then obviously pronouns will be removed from the charter, and the use of the title or function shall be instead the norm. Is there any question about those items or concerns about any of them?
I'm assuming that's towards Mr. Boyd, Chief Boyd.
Or any of the commissioners.
Oh, okay. Well, so there were a couple of hands raised before you went
Okay.
into this. So quickly, Commissioner Grant.
Mhm. You're on mute, Christopher.
Sorry about that. Yes, so I just want to make sure I understand Mr. Boyd's recommendations. You mentioned the fire chief, the police chief, and the director of personnel. The mayor would like the authority to hire and fire that person at will. Is that right?
And the airport director at will is, I hesitate to use the term at will. I think hire them in a manner that is consistent with the other department heads. I believe the mayor can hire these folks, and essentially, I think the just cause standard is really the standard for everyone once they're hired, but I think there's the initial opportunity to hire them at the beginning of a term. I want to caution against using the term at will, because I think all of our department heads, and I'll look to the city councilor to verify or correct me here, but I think for us to remove a department head currently after they've been appointed, you do have to show just cause, if I'm not mistaken. Ms. Hamilton, is that correct?
That is correct, that the current charter language for mayoral appointees is for cause, and it is not at will. The words at will do not appear in the city charter.
Yeah. Well, and that raises the question, because I've thrown a sentence in here for us to discuss whether that makes sense or not. I'm okay with it either way, but question was raised a couple times about if the mayor can appoint someone, why in the world can't they remove them at that point with or without cause? And so I've got a sentence in here. Once again, this is just a question. It says, he shall appoint and may remove all non-elective officers and employees except as otherwise in this charter provided, and may remove any office, department, or division head appointed by him with or without cause. That's the way they do it in corporations these days. Is it the way we want it to be done in the government? I don't know, but that's a question mark. I think that that may be something that we want to discuss and decide one way or another.
I will say from our part, I was not a part of the meeting with work group 3 and just reviewing the mayor's notes on this matter. I'm not sure if her intent is to change the standard.
Oh, no, that was not her intent.
Okay.
She did not mention that. Yeah, that was not her intent. It came from other resources raised the issue. And so it's simply sitting there right now as a consideration in the same way that anybody else from the public might have raised an issue. But it is not something that's that the mayor raised and is looking for in terms of change.
So the other question I had the other question I had for Mr. Boyd was I was following his description of the hiring process and how it's antiquated and the Sigma computer system and all of that, but I wasn't quite understanding, was that a proposal to change the hiring process, or was that just an example given to show why you need this, the director of personnel to be appointed and, removed just like any other department head.
I think it's the latter. It's an illustration of how when the mayor came into office, she had the opportunity to reappoint or appoint new directors, with the exception of the personnel department. I think it's an example of how over time, in areas that lack accountability or direct oversight, you can have departments that are not as responsive as they need to be. And the only if you want to continue to kind of it's hard to ask for responsiveness when that director can only be removed for misfeasance or malfeasance. That's not a standard that's present for any other department head. And like I said, that kind of atrophy or lack of responsiveness can be felt for city government workers and citizens who have services that may not meet their current needs.
To follow up on Mr. Boyd's a comment, then if we get to Article 8 here in the charter, appointments to be made by the mayor, I included the personnel director in the list of individuals, positions that the mayor would actually appoint as opposed to not, and change the wording for a couple of the names of them. So if the director of welfare, for instance, does not exist, and so it would be human services instead. Added the underlined positions, which are part of the cabinet, I believe, right now, but don't exist per charter. I did not realize that that the mayor wanted responsibility to directly appoint the fire commissioner and the police commissioner as well. Certainly think that has some merit to it. And you know, if that's the way the commissioners want to go on it, it's certainly fine. But have articulated the actual names here, I think, of the individual. The one thing I would recommend in this section, I got to thinking of it as I looked at this, is there's commissioners and there's directors and it's unclear, you know, they all have different titles. They may change from year to year, decade to decade. It probably would make more sense in this section rather than saying supply commissioner, that instead it would say, you know, the heads of the following functions or divisions or something: assessment, supply, register, you know, counsel, etc., so that you're not going back and forth between these different titles. But that's just nomenclature that we can deal with at some point in this whole process. The next section, the residency requirement that we
Commissioner
Yes.
Crossland, pardon me
Yes.
just a second. Chair Bobo, I need to leave the meeting. Is there a provision for the secretary's duties to be taken over?
Counselor Hamilton,
Yes.
do you know what the next steps are? Because also our parliamentarian has had a family emergency, so he had to leave as well.
which means we probably don't have a quorum to be able to move these forward anyway.
Right. So we might have to table this for
Yeah.
our next week.
And and I apologize for that, but
That's okay.
thank you. And if we could perhaps get this summed up and vote immediately at the next meeting, it may be of a good benefit.
Yeah.
To have a clear set of recommendations. Is that possible?
Mhm.
I will see if that's something that we can achieve.
Great.
I'll look
Great.
into it and
Thank
let you
you,
all know.
Chair.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Everybody take care.
Mhm.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Have we lost our chair? And all of our officers?
Are we all leaving?
They haven't adjourned the meeting, but Commissioner Crosland, Commissioner Grant, you appear to be the only commissioners left if you want to.
Did something, she may have accidentally dropped out of the meeting and will come back in a minute or something.
Okay.
Let's pause for a minute just to see. Unless she got dropped into a room or something accidentally when all that happened.
I thought I heard her say goodnight, everybody.
I did too.
Oh, maybe she misunderstood and figured since I said there wasn't a quorum that she wouldn't need to actually close the meeting. How do we proceed, Counselor Hamilton?
You'll need to move. You got just enough people to move in second, a motion to adjourn.
Who can do it, I guess, in lieu of the chair or vice chair?
I think you all are equals. Neither of you are officers, and so there is no hierarchy.
I move that we adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we need a roll call for this, or do we just, all those in favor? Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Good night, folks.
See everyone Monday, June 3rd.
Monday, right, okay.